Hello, welcome to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My name is Alexander Hamilton, and for me, this room holds a special place in my heart. For it was here that I convinced the delegates from the other 13 colonies to come and to debate rationale for keeping the Articles of Confederation and eventually to abolish those Articles of Confederation. They have not served us well at all throughout the war. Though we did win, despite the hindrances of the articles. Imagine every man here who represents their colony. All colonies had to agree unanimously on everything. It is so very hard for learned, trusted, strong men of such wide backgrounds, cultures, religions, how they can come together to agree on everything all the time? No, that was not to be. And so, who suffered from their indecision? The troops. Many a nights I would write on behalf of General Washington, imploring this body to send more money, food, supplies. We were an army marching on our stomach that had no food. Many harsh winters we suffered just because the men in this room could not finance our endeavors on the field of battle. The taxes that they raised were 100% voluntary. Each state would simply give in the amount that they wanted. When the war was all over, and after we had our Constitution ratified, and I became the first Secretary of the Treasury, and I started to get the finances of this young country back in order, unified under a strong central government, I had to do away with the state's control of their own money, their own currency, as well with local banks, the state governments, and the state treasuries succumbed to my debt restructuring and currency unification plan. For only under a strong dollar that is led with wisdom and um, and with wisdom, I'll leave it at that for now. Only can such a strong uh, government control its money. If you have too many people that have indirect associations with the money supply, the cost of money, you create unnecessary business inefficiencies. Too many cooks spoil the pot, it is often stated. Well, if we had how it is before the Constitution, states pitted themselves against other states. They taxed each other for different trade routes, for goods passing through their ports. And of course, all this taxation can be manipulated through the currency value as well. I needed to get control over all of that and pay the debts that the states did incur. Remember those voluntary payments that this body politic was making? Well, at the end, those accounts still have to be settled. Certain states paid a tremendous amount more into the war effort than other states did. But at the end, I was very lenient in my decisions upon how much debt a state had and how much debt that should be now acquired by the federal government instead of the states. I was very lenient in making sure that states felt that they were fully, duly compensated with an accurate accounting of all of their financial balances throughout the war. Well, there was but 25 days left of this reality. 25 days left for us to educate as well as entertain. 25 days left to use this medium as one that can inspire future generations of Americans to understand the beauty and courage and foresight of our founding fathers in those troubled times when they declared themselves to be free and then in, uh, fought for the preservation of that freedom. It all is centered around this room. If you are listening, I hope you take the opportunity to get in contact with us. Like the video, comment to the video, subscribe to the video, and visit alexanderhamilton.live. And you'll get a better insight into how you can become a part of teaching American history. I've double checked. It really is dated in two different manners. Year of our Lord, 1787, and the year of our country, the 12th. All you have to is the very last page of the Constitution, towards the end. Hello and welcome. Welcome to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My name is Alexander Hamilton, and this room holds a very special place in my heart. Do not hesitate to ask, or if there is something that you are interested in. I would love to share a story about a great many events that were so important to American history, be it to do with the military, with the law, with finance, with society, with the Constitution. Please consider me your source for an entertaining as well as educational story about our nation's beginning.
Oh, that's great. Just got here. Did the event just start or is it almost over?
Well, this is the event. Um,
This is the event?
yes. So
Okay.
this is an opportunity to talk with Alexander Hamilton. And
Oh,
every person
fantastic.
creates their own situation. If you are really quite in depth for a certain area, you might find extreme entertainment and education. Other people just come to hear a story, and they are more passive learners of American history. But all of this is really an exercise in teaching American history, and we're going to be doing so again just a couple of days on February 20th, President's Day, where we are going to recreate the debate for independence that occurred in this room in June 1776.
Oh, wow. Fabulous. Is that at the same time that this event was, or a different time of day?
I believe it's a couple of hours earlier, being it a national holiday. More people will have
Okay.
free time. But as it is still in the works, yes, it's registration is at alexanderhamilton.live if you would like to take a part in it.
Um, yeah, I might show up, but I don't think I'll pick a part. Thank you very much.
Well, certainly. Do you
And
happen to
who
have
is
a
this young
question for me?
lady that's with you over here that's really quiet? Is she your assistant or the
Yes,
computer?
Cleo is our muse of history, recording everything that is happening.
Oh wow, okay. Well, I would love to hear a story then.
And where do you hail from? Just to give me some type of connection, because I have 100 or 1,000 different stories that I can tell.
From California.
Oh, way out west. Well, do you have more of an affinity for a story of finance or law or
Finance would be great.
constitution or what happened in this room?
Finance would be great.
Say again?
Finance would be
Finance.
interesting.
Very nice. We were just talking about finance a little bit earlier. Um, During the war, this body politic was operating under the Articles of Confederation, and all taxes that were raised were on a voluntary basis. Would that be today if that was still the case? And all decisions made in this room had to be unanimous in nature. Now, how this transferred to me as I was aide de camp to General Washington throughout the war, I was the one who was verbalizing or writing down, scribing the frustration with this system, frustration with the devaluation of the continental dollar, the frustration of not being able to get enough supplies, and the harsh conditions that we had to suffer in, for example, in during the winter encampments. These events put a very strong feeling into myself when I was thinking about how the country should be, thinking about the dream of the possibility of this fledgling country. For just even in 76, when the men here met to band together in revolution, we were not banding together for a common purpose, but banding together against a common enemy. And so after the war, the major battle was Yorktown in October of 81. In 82, I went to New York to establish myself as a lawyer. And then I started already working behind the scenes to get the gentleman back into this room in order to create. Now, really, with I got about six of these gentlemen together in Annapolis in 1785 at the Annapolis Convention, and we agreed that the infighting, with the loss of the common enemy of Great Britain, the infighting between the different states is too much. It's inefficient. It is not productive. We lack a common, strong central focus. And this is where I wanted to imprint my grand design. Now, of course, after we got all the gentlemen here for the Constitutional Convention, my plan was really not accepted in almost any manner. James Madison, my good friend Gemma, could basically talk at length about that, for I basically wanted to have a president who would rule for life on good behavior. But you must understand that it's difficult to go from hereditary rule as being the norm that you've lived under hundreds of years to one of understanding that a gentleman can be decided from the community to serve for a limited amount of time. Such was the great epoch of it all. But I'll jump ahead into really into the financial part. There's a lovely story I have to say about how we, the soldiers who served under General Washington during the war, before the war was over by the Treaty of Paris in September of 83, we created the Society of Cincinnati. And so what do we do but created a hereditary association to which about 30 to 40% of the men here belong to, and you can only be a member of this association if you were an officer serving under General Washington during the war. It's interesting that when we wanted to create the Constitutional Convention, we needed a great leader to lead us through that. Of course, there was no better leader to get the people even talking about giving up the Articles of Confederation than General George Washington. You see, when I finally convinced delegates to come, we actually came under the legal responsibility from our states to change the Articles of Confederation, just to tweak it, to make modifications to it, to an organization that really is where there are 13 different countries in a united of nations together, where all decisions must be unanimous and all taxes are voluntary. This is such a weak governing body. We need something to be much stronger. Unfortunately, just to get the states to agree to that change was too much. And so when we met here, James Madison and myself had the uphill climb to convince the gentlemen here that the actions that we are doing in creating the Constitution, a more perfect union, is in itself not an illegal act, because these gentlemen did not have the legal responsibility to actually change the form of government, just to tweak it. And so, though they came here by the power of the states, after we created the US Constitution, the gentlemen here did not take it back to the states. We realized that this was far too important, that we need to unite again, unite with a common focus, and that focus is the people. So the people in each state held their own convention where they, as the population of their state, decided if they wanted to join in this Constitution or not. The Constitution was really just a 4-page document that guaranteed that certain powers would be taken away from those states, which are acting really as separate countries. And that's whatever power is written in those 4 pages, that is the limit of the federal government power. If it is not written in those 4 pages, then all natural rights and normal rights of a governing body belong then to the state. So the state actually accepted it once Virginia was accepting, and quickly came New Hampshire, then New York from my state. We accepted it, and we were one of the biggest states to accept it, meaning that the political climate in New York was actually one where we did not want to join in with the United States, the Clintonian camp, to which Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson were affiliated with. They actually did not want, and of the 3 people sent from New York, the other 2 were Clintonian delegates, and myself was alone, so I was always a minority and outvoted. New York really did not vote in the affirmative, but abstained from all the votes. It's really quite amazing. But I, along with James Madison and Mr. Livingston, we wrote the Federalist Papers. articles in local newspapers in New York to try to explain what the Constitution is, to try to explain the rights that we have as people, to try to explain where those rights come from, and to try to explain when those rights taken in aggregate and actually then overcome other rights of a minority, and how to balance out the different powers of the different rights of different groups, namely the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branches. We convinced enough New Yorkers to basically to go with it. And of course, after Virginia accepted the Constitution, New York was quick to basically, they would not bow out at that time. Once the Constitution was ratified and we became a country, it was now up to me to create the strong American dollar. It was up to me to create the possibility of the United States. What I was given is a vast tract of land and tremendous human talent, which has not yet been unleashed. So I wanted to take away the local mindset of enterprise and bring it into a national scale. So through taxation, I can have some money that would then go to build a dam in a rural area that would not normally have to build it. But now that it's built, the power from that mill next to the dam could then supply farmers for 50 miles in a radius. And then more farmers would come in to tame that land. And then those farmers be able to take their grain and grind it, hence giving the product a longevity from weeks to months to years once it's ground into a flour. So it's these types of enterprising activities that I was in charge of creating, and it's noted in my reports on manufacturing. One of the hardest things I had to do, though, was with currencies. And this is where it becomes an interesting parallel to the 21st century, or in the 18th century, people could create their own currencies. Banks could create their own currencies, of course, states could create their own currencies. Any organization could create their own money. Now, it's done on a fundamental level, like, for example, with a farmer. If he has a crop that is growing well and he has to buy something, it is known that he will soon be flush with money with the harvest of his crop, but at this moment he does not. So he writes a promissory note. That's really what currency is. It's a accepted means of a worth being able to be transferred from one person to another. And if you see that Farmer Jenkins basically has a good crop, then you would accept his note. And then you can use that note to go and buy milk, or and then for the dairy farmer to pay the tiller. And as long as everyone knows who Farmer Jenkins is and how well his crops are, they will believe in that note, and then they will pay it when it comes due. But my problem with trying to steer the economic possibility of this great country was that I did not have enough control. I need to control the finance. I need currency, not on 14. Of course, the states would control their own. So I had to basically wrestle all of that away in order to make a more efficient business model for the American dollar. I was able to do that, though this is where the original schism between the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists, to which I belong to, came about. Where Thomas Jefferson said to me, where in the Constitution does it say that the federal government has the ability to create a bank for your currencies? Because of course, if I'm going to now have a strong central currency and I'm going to create bonds in order to pay the debts that have already been incurred, both domestically in the United States as well as internationally. The way that I did it was to simply, for the federal government to issue bonds at 6%, and the sale of those bonds would actually pay the interest of the original bonds that were occurred during the war. I was able to do this successfully, almost too successfully, which occurred with the first bubble in Wall Street in 1792. And I'll come back to that story in just a moment. Or Thomas Jefferson was really, and now James Madison, who was my good friend throughout the Federalist Papers, writing them in New York in 87 and 88. Now that Jefferson has come home, those two Virginians have gotten together, and James Madison is now firmly believing in what Thomas Jefferson tells him. And so it is an uphill climb. Even at one point, when I was really at the brink of, if I don't get my bill passed in Congress, it will fail and I will have to resign as Secretary of the Treasury, and all of my dreams for America will come crashing down. It is on that night in New York that I met Thomas Jefferson. And he decided to arbitrate a deal between myself and James Madison, who is now the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and hence controlling when my financial bills can come onto the Congress to vote on them. And so we came up with a great dinner deal in the room where it happened, where I was able to give them control over, well, I should say, I would lend my support to their endeavors to bring the U.S. Capitol down onto the Potomac, where George Washington already had his Mount Vernon located. In exchange, James Madison would simply allow my bill to come up for a vote. And it did. And basically it passed. I was able to kind of continue. As a small side note, it's interesting that later on, Thomas Jefferson, when he was president and in power, he then decided to use the credit which I created in order to buy the Louisiana territory. And of course, where does it say in the Constitution that a president has the right to be a real estate broker? It does not. But it does state that the government has the ability to do whatever is necessary and proper for the functioning of its duties. And so for me, having a bank, which is an institution which accepts the payments of people buying bonds and transmits the payments on the interest, it is a true necessary function. It is that building today, which really has changed, and it's though originally it has changed into what you have now as the current Federal Reserve. Probably the most interesting part is that, again, civilization has started creating their own currencies in the form of cryptocurrencies. Now, this is based on a business model where you cannot use a real currency to fund the creation of the blockchain, because no one would simply want to do that, or at least at the time. Now they do that. But basically just having the necessary capital to build this, since that didn't exist, they built it basically on a promissory note through cryptocurrencies, to which is really a topic for another day. But I will say that the Federal Reserve Bank in New York City is the one in charge of writing the blue papers for the federal government's control over those cryptocurrencies in the United States. If it was up to me, I would tell Congress exactly what to do, what they need to do. Your current Federal Reserve has basically said what they consider to be good ideas and pros and cons of the situation, and they are leaving all that information out to the executive and legislative branch to today decide how to continue. But I'm very happy that your government is creating a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, which will be the medium of exchange for all government transactions. Is a business efficiency to have that located, the record blockchain. And I know a tremendous amount of the problems of ledgers, starting with my time at 11 years of age, working by hand for an international trading firm. But again, I told you I like to talk, and I can go on and on.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Oh, I'm
do
at,
you record these and put them up on like a YouTube channel, or do you just do these kind of one on one here at Altspace, or 1 in 10, or with 10, or whatever shows up, or what do you do with your
both basically. Yes.
good, good.
Um,
It's,
we're
it's good to
trying different
share.
things in order to get. Sorry.
It's good to share with the whole world because I mean we're just a small group here, but it's good to have things on YouTube or other platforms to help educate and teach. So that's good.
Oh, yes. This is actually being streamed live to, I believe, 4 or 5 different platforms.
Oh,
And then, so yeah, and then recorded there as well. So we have gotten up on that level. But really, nothing beats when people come in. And some of my best discussions have been with people from different countries who have a much different feeling for what democracy is. So there's always, you never know who you will find. But you only can find someone for 25 days before all of this evaporates.
yeah, sadly, yes. I was curious. I went back east at one point in time and went to some of the settlements, Williamsburg and some of the other ones, and I recall at least one or two places we went to had an armory. Was the armory a place where they stored guns for the whole town, just for the military, or was it you lived in the town if you had guns that you weren't using for hunting that they were stored there, or what was the purpose beyond the military side? Would I be allowed to keep a cache of weapons in my home, or was I required to keep the more powerful ones in the armory?
So each colony itself had its own powder magazine and armory. These were paid for by domestic taxes, by local taxes, as a means for people to defend themselves, as there was no public good of a police department yet in the 18th century. And so, if, for example, in Williamsburg, Virginia, a very genteel town who has a quite a prominent powder magazine, that would only be utilized when there was a problem with pirates or the French or the Spanish or Indians or brigands or whatnot. And it would be for the citizens who do not own a musket and don't have the accoutrements to basically to go and to help and to defend town. Most people in
Mhm.
town don't really need to have one, but if you're out of town, you most certainly do because it's your prime source of, so many things, everything from fat to food to clothing, and can be caught by the musket. Um, there's an interesting story which most people don't know, that there was a coordinated effort by the King of England in order to disarm both the motley crew up of that they call the Patriots and Sons of Liberty up in Boston, who were creating a lot of problems in 74 and 75 before the war, of course, um, and down in Virginia at Williamsburg. Now, Williamsburg is the capital of Virginia, and Virginia has about 20% of the landmass of all 13 colonies combined because it goes all the way to the Mississippi River and then goes all the way up to the Great Lakes. It's a tremendous property. Um, on the very same night, this is in Boston, when there was a concerted effort to go and capture the rebel leaders and capture out town. The government already has control over the stashes of arms, the powder magazine in Boston. That they go out and try to do that. This is, of course, basically the Battle of Lexington and Concord, one if by land, two if by sea, the Longfellow poem of how the British were to make their way on out. And then my good friend Paul Revere was one of those with Richard Dawes and Samuel Prescott, Dr. Prescott, to go out and to inform the citizenry of what was going on. With the British coming to disarm the people in rural lands, where really you are free to talk because of the British occupation in Boston. Um, this happened in Williamsburg, Virginia, on the very same night. So the British government, the military government, the regulators, with Lord Dunmore's approval, the Lord Governor, the governor's representative to the king in Williamsburg, they went and totally disarmed the powder magazine. They took away all of the weapons. So if you are looking for a fundamental reason for the Second Amendment about that fear that the government can come and take away your arms for your ability to create your own militia, that is the defining moment when that happened in Williamsburg, Virginia, on the same night as going out to Lexington, Concord. And in truth, as I'm a New Yorker and I was in New York at the time, the only reason why that the British regulars did not take the powder magazine in New York was because of a long history of armed conflicts with the Sons of Liberty, to which I was a member. And their proximity to each other is really quite interesting. The Sons of Liberty had Montaigne's Tavern, which is on Broadway right there, and the British barracks were right here. Our Liberty pole was right here, which they kept cutting down. There's a long history of that. And the powder magazine was here. So, in order for them to take it, these Sons of Liberty, who are permanently stationed at that tavern, basically would have been able to create a rally of the citizens enough to put down the British regulars that were stationed in New York. And the governor of New York knew this because of past history. It already had happened, and they know the numbers and they know where they stand. And really, the governors were really quested with the task of keeping things settled, not creating more problems. Um, but that's a grandiose answer to what a powder magazine is in the 18th century.
That was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, I am going to hop a little bit. I saw, I don't normally come on at this time of day, but I saw a couple interesting sounding events and I wanted to attend one or two for, you know, kind of see what they were like. And I appreciate this time with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And,
Thank you. Spread the word. I'm actually going to go to Horizon Worlds right now.
okay, fantastic. Enjoy it over there.
Mm.
Is that where you spend a part of your time normally? Is that where you're going to move on to after Altspace?
Yes. So, well, it's a much different environment. So I've launched myself here back in 21, and I've been about 6 months in the Horizon Worlds. It's much more emotional there. It's much more, it's here. This is much more logical. This is much more the reality, the reasoning, the debate in a room like this. So there's a whole different method to which I can teach American education or American history in at the Horizon World. So it's developing, but I make myself available to talk with people there and as well every day.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again.
My pleasure.
Nice
Have a
meeting
great
you.
day.
Thank you. You too.